And it's been a lot in the news, Governor Walker's idea that he announced at the White House with President Trump to give up to $3 billion to a large multinational corporation from Taiwan called Foxconn to come to around the Illinois border, probably either Racine or Kenosha County. And they're trying to rush through in record speed a $3 billion subsidy. They claim it'll be up to 13,000 direct jobs. There are disagreements on the secondary jobs. It was 22,000 at first, but there's a new audit that came out of an open records request that showed analysis that actually showed 10,000 jobs less than that. And so the question really is, in north central Wisconsin, where there's been a hemorrhaging of family-supporting jobs with the closure of paper mills and other factories and industrial jobs, if this makes sense for the people of Wausau to put money in to a huge factory on the Illinois border. And our conclusion is, Citizen Action members across the state and the ones here at the North Central Wisconsin Cooperative, is it's a terrible deal for the whole state actually, but especially in areas far away from the Illinois border. So if you look at it with the job promises, even if you take them seriously, even if you actually believe this number of jobs will be created, the research shows that states and localities pay far less per job in corporate subsidies than Governor Walker wants to pay. This is a really stacked deal against the people of Wisconsin. Even by the best case scenarios, which are unlikely, we're paying 6 times more per job, okay, even if you believe those jobs will be created. The second issue is that the people who negotiated the deal is the CEO of Governor Walker's very controversial economic development agency, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, or WSAU, which according to the latest state audit, and there's been a series of very bad audits, shows that they still are unable to track the number of jobs actually created. They don't even check the payroll data of corporations they're paying to create jobs. And now we propose putting them in charge of an economic development project, apparently the 4th largest in American history and 50 times larger than any in Wisconsin history, and they're going to verify that the jobs are created. Well, we did an event in Eau Claire with the Western Wisconsin Organizing Cooperative. The Walker office put out a release saying that this is pay per performance and said that we'll only give money when the jobs are created. That's not the case, partly because half the subsidies go just for building the plant, but secondly because they're putting WSAU in charge of verification, and after 7 years they still can't verify job creation, okay? So now, by the way, the research shows that corporate subsidies do not increase employment. They do not increase the wages. They do not increase the economic fortunes of a state or a locality. So based on the research, this won't even improve things in Wisconsin, but will be out $3 billion. Now, the problem is, if there's $3 billion, and we actually think there is, right? Now, they may not raise the money for it. They'll make other huge cuts later, which is a problem, but you could raise the $3 billion for development, quite frankly. But we've been told throughout the whole Walker administration that there's no money. That's why there have been devastating cuts to the UW system, to the technical colleges, to our K-12 system, unnecessary cuts to healthcare, which is a huge industry here in north central Wisconsin. We actually could put this money back in and put more money in to expand the universities, expand the tech colleges, to expand UWC Marathon County, which would create a lot more jobs. According to the economic research, you would create over 80,000 jobs if you put $3 billion into education in this state. You would create over 60,000 jobs if you put it in healthcare, and healthcare is a huge employer here in north central Wisconsin. You'd create over 50,000 jobs if you put in renewable energy and energy conservation and efficiency, which is what we need to do anyway to transition to a clean economy that doesn't create a global climate disaster. Now, here's what this comes down to, and I'm going to hand it off to Joel in a minute, talk about the environmental consequences, which are also very disconcerting, but here's what it's about. Back in the 19th century, Wisconsinites thought, or our corrupt political leaders thought, that giving huge subsidies to the timber barons, to the railroad barons, that would create prosperity. And all that led to, in places like Wausau, is an extraction of the lumber, despoiling the environment, and very little left behind once those companies left and took our money. So then we kind of got a clue. We started getting it right, and we built the UW system, one of the best university systems in the country, the tech college system, which is really the best technical college system in the whole country. Our K-12 schools, even though they're cut, they're still some of the best in the country. And we built that strength not only to create a ton of jobs, it also created an educated electorate, right? That and workforce that created more opportunity and built strength. And so we don't need Foxconn to come and decide to plant itself here on the Illinois border. And by the way, we have some land for you in Florida if you believe they're going to be sourcing that to north central Wisconsin when they're that close to Chicago, and when they can get stuff in from overseas across the Great Lakes, placing it right on Lake Michigan, okay? But even if they did, this is a horrible investment for most of the state. So there's no doubt north central Wisconsin needs family supporting jobs. We've lost a lot of family supporting jobs. This is a horrible way to spend $3 billion. We could spend it in a way that creates opportunity here in north central Wisconsin and across the state if we invested in education, we invested in healthcare, and we invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And with that last point, because that would be good environmentally, this gets a horrible precedent that will impact not only the environment in Kenosha and Racine County, but will also set a precedent for here in north central Wisconsin, which should spoil the great environment, which is one of the great selling points of this region as well. So Joel Lewis, who is the organizer for the North Central Wisconsin Organizing Co-op, is going to say a few words about the environmental impact of this very bad deal.
All right, thank you, Robert. So I just want to say that a lot of the members of the North Central Organizing Co-op, environmental issues are one of their #1 concerns. And so we have over 200 people that have told us that they want us to look at these issues. My wife and I and my family have been involved in a lot of fights to protect the environment. And one of the things that's most shocking about this Foxconn deal is that they would like to take nearly over 15,850,200 gallons of water out of Lake Michigan every single day to operate their facility. This is clean drinking water. This is water that provides for our tourism industry, for our fishing industry. Our northern part of our state is suffering for a good economy, for family sustaining jobs. One of the things they'll tell you up there is our kids go to college, they never come back. We don't see our grandkids, we don't see our kids, and it's because we don't have jobs up there. So instead of giving $3 billion to a company that stands to threaten our environment, that stands to take way more money than they're going to give back, let's give that money to northern Wisconsin and invest in good family sustaining jobs up here so we can bring our kids and our grandkids and our families back to this part of the state. Thank you.
And the precedent, right, so the idea that this is going to create jobs in the North Woods is absurd, but the money comes from all of us, right? But environmentally, they're getting rid of environmental impact statements, something we've had for at least since the 1960s. They're giving this company the ability to redirect streams, to get rid of wetlands at their discretion. And what's going to happen is that even if that doesn't impact the North Woods and north central Wisconsin directly, the next company that wants to come will say, hey, Foxconn got that, why can't we get that? And before you know it, we're actually risking the precious natural resources up here, which is one of the main attractions of this region, one of the things that we cannot allow to be despoiled and dissipated in any way. So no jobs for north central Wisconsin and North Woods really, or very little for this. We could get lots of jobs for $3 billion up here, and a huge threat to our natural resources and our wonderful environment in this region. So with that, let us see if there are any questions from the Fourth Estate.
What would be a fair number for tax incentives to bring 13,000 jobs or even 3,000 jobs into Wisconsin? If it's not $3 billion, what would be a good number?
Well, if you look at there's research by the Upjohn Employment Institute that looks at all subsidies back to 1990. Now, the same folks who found no correlation between that and actually in more employment and more wages. But if you believe in that approach, which we actually don't, you should be paying 6 times less per job based on his best case scenario, Walker and Foxconn's. And there are a lot of scenarios out there. If you look at Legislative Fiscal Bureau, the Wisconsin Budget Project, they're a lot worse. So even taking his best case, we should be creating not about 13,000 jobs, but about 70,000 jobs with this money. But if you were to make direct investments, because the key thing is here, we don't have to wait for some big Taiwanese company to decide to plant itself here and shake us down and cut a secret deal. If we took the $3 billion and invested in education, it would create over 80,000 jobs. And if you look at the state still, unless you're in the building trades, and we want to create construction jobs like you see behind us, right? But with a few exceptions, if you don't have at least associate's degree, it's assumed in our economy you don't have access to the middle class. Well, only 41% of workers currently get at least associate's degree, a 2-year degree, which means we should be doubling the size of the tech college system and the UW Center system and the UW system, and we could do that with this money. Healthcare is the same thing. There's free money on the table we could take for healthcare, but that's an investment. That's a huge industry in the North Woods and north central Wisconsin, would create over 60,000 jobs. And renewable energy, the thing about renewable energy is with biofuels and with wind and with solar, that's something that creates jobs everywhere. So an investment here would create jobs here in north central Wisconsin. And then what happens when workers have money in their pocket, they spend it at the local small business, the local community, and that creates more jobs. And there's just no way this Foxconn deal is going to create that ripple effect here in north central Wisconsin or in the North Woods.
So to your question, you said you're spending at least six times too much.
Yeah, generously 6 times more.
Would
yeah.
$500 million be a respectable investment? If that's 1/6 of the $3 billion.
Well, we would say, first of all, that we don't think the jobs are coming because Governor Walker's
Is any
Economic
investment a good
Development
investment?
Agency, investment's very good.
Is any investment in Foxconn a good investment?
Well, it's very questionable whether corporate subsidies create more opportunity. But if you're going to do them, right, you have to tie the money down tight. So that be very clear clawbacks. The clawback is when, if you don't create the jobs, you have to give back the money. That's not clear at all in this. It says that the Governor Walker's Economic Development Agency may claw back the money, if it even knows, because it doesn't track very well, as we currently know, right? So you build that in, you would build, and you would have much more accountability. Another thing here, because this is such a horribly drawn deal, could you create a Foxconn deal that was accountable and well structured and paid a relevant enough amount for jobs that might make economic sense? You could. I think education, healthcare, and renewable energy would be better investments, but that would be a better case. Okay, but we're so far away from that with this deal. This is the way this worked was that Foxconn, they didn't even testify in the 10-hour hearing that I sat through in the assembly. They hired a consulting firm that played all the states off each other and took the best bid that met all of their criterion. So Foxconn wrote this deal, not Governor Walker, not the state legislature. It's in their interest. So I don't know if they'd come if we had a really well-structured deal. So, but there are a lot of amendments that some legislators are offering. None of them got a vote in the state assembly or went anywhere. But if you set up real clear standards and it made sense, it could make sense. But then again, I don't see why it would make sense to north central Wisconsin to take all of your money and put it into a factory so close to Illinois, where a lot of the jobs will go to Illinois and a lot of the supplying will come from Chicago or from overseas via the Great Lakes.
The signs say Foxconn is a bad deal for Wausau. If Foxconn was coming to Wausau, wouldn't people in Racine be saying Foxconn's a bad deal for Racine?
Well, there are a lot of people who think it may be a bad deal for Racine and Kenosha, and I'll give you an example. Even not included in the $3 billion is they're going to create TIF districts, and so if Foxconn leaves, and just which they can do, right, in 10 years, they could leave Racine County. It looks like it's Racine County now because that's where Speaker Robin Vos is from. Could be left with $1 trillion in debt. And you all know about that because of the situation with Brokaw. So in fact, north central Wisconsin folks could say a lot to Racine about be careful about essentially indebting your county and your city to a large multinational corporation that could leave at any time.
This is such a bad deal. Why did the Assembly Minority Leader, a Democrat, Peter Barkov, vote for it?
Well, he's under a lot of fire for that actually, but he represents.
Well, and he had 2 other Democrats that voted for it as well.
Yeah, both from the area, because there's.
Well, some would suggest it's a good deal for that area if they voted for it.
I would propose this, and this is what I would say to the minority in the legislature right now, because we're nonpartisan. We want them to be more aggressive too. Where is their plan to create 80,000 jobs? And so because they don't have one as a caucus, right, individual legislators may, but as a caucus, right, then you're in a situation, if you're sitting in Kenosha or Racine, where there's, like the north central Wisconsin, a desperate need for high-scoring jobs, where someone comes along with this really bad deal, and it's like, well, it's that bad deal versus nothing. So if you need a house and you only got one deal in front of you, you might make a really bad deal. As we've been saying, there's like buying a $900,000 house for $150,000, but if that's the only house there and you need shelter, you might buy it. So I think part of the problem is not making a clearly presenting alternative, and that's what members of Citizen Action Wisconsin, the organizing cooperatives around the state, are pushing for, is to show what the real alternatives to. But if it's nothing versus Foxconn, I can see why some folks in Racine and Kenosha might say we might as well do it.
So I'm hearing from you that Citizen Action is thinking that neither caucus has a good jobs plan for Wisconsin. Is that what you're saying?
Right. The Republican caucus currently, for Walker, see, Governor Walker is up for re-election in 2018, and here's the bad, perverse incentive. He can go and announce this big deal, and they passed it and promise all these jobs, get reelected, they don't even break ground until 2020. So when it's a disaster, theoretically, I mean, it's a disaster probably years after that, he's long gone and is a governor emeritus or has moved on to the national level. So there's an incentive here, and there's the problem with economic development deals. It happens with local officials too, for an elected leader to get credit for something up front where the disaster of it doesn't become clear until they're long gone.